to another episode of Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie, and with me is the beautiful Crystal Ann Compton. And today, believe it or not, we are finally at the end of our beautiful little gem, the Four Agreements. And Crystal, I've really enjoyed reading this book. I'm going to miss it.
I'm going to miss it too. And I think we're going to have to revisit it. But
Agreed.
I know you mentioned today when we were talking that you've actually found yourself thinking about the agreements in your day-to-day life. Like you're actually you're up in that balcony, honey, above the
Yes.
mitote, checking out all of
Love the
the
mitote.
conversations happening. Me too. Like I just noticed that it's all presented again so simply and in a way that makes perfect sense that it really is easy to start to integrate that into your life and make some profound changes.
Yes, and it's funny because we always think that things need to be really complicated,
Right.
but in reality, the simpler the answer, the probably the closer to the truth that it is,
I
you
think you're
know?
right. Have you ever read like anything by Drunvalo Melchizedek, like
No,
the Flower of Life teaching, which
no.
is all very fascinating, but it is so dense and so complicated. And like the practices and the rituals are just so much that it's just
Yeah.
like I'm probably never going to do it.
It's
I
like it's
want
not gonna
to.
happen.
It sounds good, but I'm probably never going to do it. And I think
Yeah,
that's what really appeals to me about this book in particular, because these are profound concepts simplified and accessible for
exactly.
the regular people like you and me.
Absolutely. I love it. And I think also that it's a lot of ego sometimes that drives us to try to make it so cerebral that we divorce it from the body, from the experience of the teaching, rather than the intellectualism of the
Mhm.
idea for the sake of being intellectual without actually utilizing it. So this is part of like what you're teaching, in your program about coming back into your body and being embodied and resonating and knowing when things are true from your gut, not from your mind, because your
Yes.
mind is supposed to support the body, not the other
Right.
way around.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
yes, I think this is unbelievable, the power of this little book.
And I think when you are connecting to spirit or connecting to source energy or connecting to your higher self, that communication is always simple. And it's in a
Mm-hmm.
way that you can perfectly understand. And I'm not saying some of the books that we've got on the list, quite honestly, they're going to be more dense. We're kind of starting with the
Yeah.
foundational stuff so that we can build up from there. But there's something to be said for just like sitting in the wisdom that Don Miguel Ruiz brings through this book and just allowing that to activate in my life. And I, like you, I've just noticed me noticing myself waiting a beat, just a moment before I answer somebody, usually my husband. And I ask myself, is this the most loving response? Is this the most kind and compassionate response? Do you even need to respond? How can you
Yes.
be impeccable in your word? And I've had less of a problem, I think, taking care of that don't take anything personally part. I think I
Mm-hmm.
did a lot of work on that about 20 years ago, but it's kind of easy, right? I don't know. Nobody's really shouting any insults in my face or telling me
Yeah.
who it is that I am, but like that hasn't been a really difficult concept for me to grasp. But always do your best. That's another one I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about. Like, is this my very best? Is it worth doing if I can't do it in my
Yes.
in my best? So yeah, just a lot of really, really good things
So which did
coming
you
through
find
this.
the hardest of all of them?
A 100% be impeccable with your word. I am a mouthy broad. I'm a mouthy girl, and I'm intelligent, and I'm a funny person, if I do say so myself. I'm
You
like,
may.
and my primary thing in life is to communicate. Okay, I got my big
Mm-hmm.
ol' chakra open and just jewel toned and lovely, and I'm just chirping. I'm chirping all the time. And
Yes.
so thinking about like the idea of economy of words, not having to use all of the words, or
Yes.
trying to arrange the words in a somewhat magical configuration to activate something within myself or somebody else, that for me is a really big deal.
Yes.
So that one for me.
Yes. I found that one to be the hardest as well. Um, if only because of the quantity, right? Because you're constantly speaking. We're constantly speaking. So there's a lot more to manage than the occasional thing that someone tells us that we are not supposed to take personally, or even the situations that call for assumptions, right? But the words, you're speaking from the moment you get up till the moment you go to bed. So there's just a lot of volume of things to be
Right.
aware of, you know? And then for me also was the question of impeccability and what did that really look like? And we talked about it a little bit, I think, last week, just about, what about fun? What about humor? What about just a joke that's a joke for the sake of a joke, not to be cruel or mean or, but in the end, I realized that it was more about my energy in what I was saying that I started to pay attention to, and that automatic, especially simple things like even my dog. I noticed that I am always saying to my husband, because he's still kind of a puppy. He's a year and a half, and he's just sometimes the best behaved dog, and then every so often he gets these zoomy days. We call them zoomy days because he just goes nuts, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so I would tell him, I'm like, oh no, today's one of those days. He's a loco. He's a loco. He's crazy. You know what I mean? And then I caught myself and I'm like, am I condemning Luca to act crazy because I say that he's crazy all the time? And it's so simple. It's so stupid. I mean, it's a dog, right? I mean, I love my dog. Like he's,
Of
my child,
course.
but nonetheless, it's a pet. And yet I'm using language and he's fulfilling all that language. He's
Hmm.
fulfilling what I'm expecting. And that got me thinking about what we create with our expectation, because we collapse, right? That whole quantum field with the statements that we make, we create them. And so nothing else can be created. So I just really started to notice how often my language is creating things that I don't want. I don't want those things, yet I'm constantly speaking them into existence. So this book really allowed me to just notice how often that's truly happening for me in my life, and hopefully now correct, so
Hmm.
that I can produce a different outcome in those areas that I want to improve.
But certainly, this is the kind of thing that this kind of refinement of language takes time. And I think it's going to be the work of your entire life to always be speaking a reflection of what your true inner intention is, your heart intention, your God intention, as opposed to all the other stuff you could be speaking about that is creating something you don't necessarily want. So just like becoming mindful of how powerful these words are. But like, don't make assumptions is also really so important.
Ooh,
It's so important because, and I've done a lot of learning on this. I actually had some great teachers here. I actually got into a bit of not like a argument, but like a little conflict with somebody who was really, really close to me. She had done something that I was kind of side eyeing, and I had to like decide whether to say something about it or not. And at the end of the day, I said, I don't want this between us. I don't want to be making assumptions about what just happened there. So let me tell you, I tell the person what my thought was about the thing. They get upset and get defensive. And so it kind of turns into a drama. But I remember so clearly one thing she said. She's like, can we just agree at all times to always have the assumption that the other person is doing the very best that they can? And even though they're getting it wrong, and even though you might be questioning in the moment, hey, why are they doing that? If we can start with the assumption that I would never hurt you, I would never willfully say anything against you, can we start there? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that just in a
yeah.
moment rewired the way that I interacted with her, but also everybody else. Like, what kind of world would it be, Elenique, if I just gave everybody the benefit of the doubt like that?
Yep.
That they are doing their best, that they are managing in the best way possible, that they don't want to hurt me, that they're not doing this to annoy me. What if I always started from a place of love? And that's what
Well,
the
yeah.
ultimate challenge
Wow.
is. Yeah.
It is. And that is the truth. At the end, everything we're doing, all these techniques, it's to strip away the barriers to the awareness of love's presence
Yes.
in everyone and everything that we are around, and situations and everything, And so and love is the easiest thing. At the end, it's the easiest, most beautiful thing. It's what's left. but it's hard to see because it's so covered over with defense mechanisms and projections and defenses and walls and like you said, that whole thing, I love this idea of the reticular activating system of the brain. And I played the game with my son yesterday in the car because I don't remember what he said, but I think he misunderstood something that some of the classmates said, and he was offended. And I said to him, but what if that's not what they meant? He goes, no, that's what they meant. I said, but maybe that's what you were looking to believe about the situation, because he had already complained, about these particular kids. And I said, let's play a game. Let's look out for red cars. Show me the first red car that you see. And he pointed it out. I said, show me the next red car that you see. And it was like, there it is. There's another one. There's another one. I said, did you see what your mind just did there, Nick? It showed you only the red cars because it was only what you were looking for. So if you start to look for evidence that they're actually being friendly to you, that the words don't mean what you think they mean, that they might even be compliments, imagine what you might notice. But right now, your expectation is filtering out any other possibility. And he was like, that's pretty cool, Mom. I'm going to try that.
Awesome.
So I hope he does use it. But for me, I mean, when I tell him about these things, it just reminds myself, it's a teaching to myself to notice what I'm focusing on and give the benefit of the doubt.
And you mentioned you have a 1.5-year-old dog, and I do too. Boone, I think, is going to be 1.5 years in November.
Okay.
And talk about a being that always makes the best assumption. I honestly marvel when I wake up in the morning and I walk into the room. He gets right up like a gentleman. He's like, oh, let me get right up. Let me hustle on over there. Let me sniff around you. Let me give you kisses. Let me just love you so much every single day. It doesn't matter what kind of mood I'm in. It doesn't matter what happened the day before. He always starts from the place of love, and therefore he's just joy. He's just always joy, whether he's acting out or being particularly zoomy, irrespective of that. But he's always in a place of joy, and he's always greeting me in the same way. And so, like, he's a teacher to me. Like, I want somebody that's special to me. Anytime they enter the room or the conversation or we get on a call, I want to make them feel like Boone makes me feel every single morning. Like, I'm so happy to see you. You are so valuable to me. I am excited that you are here. Whew, it makes such a difference.
Can you imagine? And how good would that feel to receive that? Even imagine from a human. Yes. I mean, it already feels incredible to receive it from a pet. But imagine if you could get that from another human being, just that full appreciation of who you are, and that who you are doesn't have to be anything but what you are being in that moment. Yes. Nothing to aspire to, nothing more, nothing less, no more craving to be worthy enough or to be seen in a certain way, but just to be truly seen, and then to have someone reflect that acceptance and love for you. It just must be, and I think that's what it is when people have mystical experiences. I think they experience that love of God. That they can know you are valuable and worthy and loved, and it depends on nothing that you do. And that's, I think, why they cry. And I think that's why it's so moving to just rest in that peace, the peace of that love.
I wonder why humans and humanity messed that up so much by, like, the need to create a doctrine of, for example, original sin, which is such an absolutely ridiculous doctrine when you read it, like read the words, talk about an arrangement of words. St. Augustine, and I believe Thomas Aquinas, like, perpetuated this, but the whole doctrine is based on this idea that you contract sin through the seminal fluid of a man. And that's how you pass it along through your human condition, which is already so base and so dirty. You just keep passing it along to generation and generation. I'm like, how did we get there? All the way from, but God loves you unconditionally. God loves everything about you. In fact, God created you from the imagination and the creativity of God. Did you come into being, and he's loved you from the moment you were created till now. Like, how do we get to the point where we need to create the mitote, or we need to create the dream of the planet and all of these rules and regulations for absolutely everything? How much you should work, what you should look like, how many children you should have, where your value lies. And we so easily trust the illusion of the planet, which is the whole point of this book, really, is to just wake up. Wake up, honey. This is the matrix. You as a soul have agreed to incarnate into the matrix, but you were excited to do so. I believe we were excited to do so. And as soon as we got here, we contracted amnesia.
Yeah.
And then we had to go inward, turn inward to find our way back into alignment with the source of all things. And it's only through the recognition of the faulty agreements, which are just beliefs and concepts of self. Even if it's a belief about somebody else, it's still a belief about you. It starts with that. Finding where those agreements are, relinquishing those agreements, and we can start with the little ones and move up to the big ones, or we can just create, like we talked about last week, we can create the vibrational state of willingness. I'm willing to release all of my faulty agreements, and then onboarding these agreements that truly give you life and give you the structure to live in a beautiful world. In fact, this last chapter that we get to in the Four Agreements is called the New Dream. So, not the dream of the planet, but the new dream, which is indeed heaven on earth. What did you think, Elenique, about this chapter?
I
It's
mean,
small, but it's mighty.
I love it. I love it because it poses the questions that begin a new way of thinking about what's possible. And I love that he reminds us that, the dream that we're living, in fact, is our creation. We are creating it with the thoughts that we choose, and then the emotions that those create, and then the beliefs that come from those emotions, and ultimately the behavior that arises out of those, that whole chain that ends in action, which reinforces the belief, right?
Let me
So it's,
just, can I stop you there? Because that's
yeah,
such an important point, which is that we continue to create the dream as opposed to the dream is a static structure. The
right.
dream is a static dimension that we just were born into. And this is what it is. No, it's always changing just as we are changing, which is why it's so important to always be aware of how it is you're creating. Okay, thank you. I just had to point that out. That's a good
No, that's exactly
observation.
what I love about it, because it implies that it's in our power to change our dream. We're not victims, we're not trapped. And he says, that you have the power to create hell and you have the power to create heaven. So why not dream a different dream? And I think that the question begins there. Why not dream a different dream? And why are we so resistant to dream a different dream? And I think it's a lot to do with the conditioning, right? The conditioning and the imprinting and the fear that gets attached from being excluded from the society, from the community, which is kind of inbuilt into our old part of our brain, right? To be safe, you need to be part of the unit, part of the community. So I think that this is where the work is, right? In releasing those fears, in stepping into your authenticity, and then from that authentic place, daring to dream a different dream for yourself and for the whole. So for
Mhm.
me, that was one of the key things from that particular chapter that I appreciated, the reminder.
Yes, and also that the new dream has to be anchored in and animated by love and
Mm-hmm.
only love. Love for yourself, love for your fellow man. Choosing, like we're talking about these assumptions, choosing the assumption of love. That is a choice. All of this is just a choice. You can choose to live in hell. If that's where you want to be, that is where you will be. But this other
Yes,
choice is always available. And this is that choice of love, which, again, so simple. And we have to ask, why don't more of us choose it? Why would we rather contract a sin through through an STD? Like, why do we
yeah,
put all of these sorts of rules and regulations into our experience as opposed to like, let's just be love and let's see what happens?
absolutely. And I like when he says, that imagine you have the ability to see the world with different eyes, whenever you choose. And when you open your eyes, you see the world around you in a different way. What you will see is love coming out of the trees, love coming out of the sky,
Mm,
love coming out of the light. You will perceive love from everything around you. This is the state of bliss.
mm,
And I tried to practice that this week. I tried to go outside, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit outside and I'm going to try to perceive the love in the trees. Nature is always such an easy one, right? Because it's so willing to give. So I sat outside and I looked at this palm tree and I looked at it and looked at it as a point of fixation, almost like a meditation, just focusing on this tree. And after a while, you could almost feel literally like love emanating, light emanating from the tree, from the wind, from the birds. It's almost like each thing was trying to give me love because I opened up to the possibility of not just taking them for granted, which is what we do with the beauty that surrounds us and the love that surrounds us. We take it for granted and we don't become present to it. And so I think that that's another trick is to step into presence so you can witness love because we're just driving by love at high speeds on the internet and starved for it, looking everywhere for it and not being able to slow down and just accept it, you
Yes.
know?
He even says here, the world is very beautiful. The world is very wonderful. Life can be very easy when love is your way of life, and you can be loving all the time. Again,
Mm-hmm.
this is your choice. You may not have a reason to love, but you can love because to love makes you happy. Love in action only ever produces happiness. Love will give you inner peace. It will change your perception of anything. Now, here's a question I'd like to ask you, which concerns getting into the practice of love, because that feels a little bit to me like one of those things where somebody says, snap out of it, just be love. Okay, well, how? Say I am on the highway and I'm cruising down the highway and everybody's got road rage and we've got traffic jams and it's difficult in my human condition in that moment to be love. How can I shift from that state in an experience like that into a higher state where I can be love? Any advice?
My first thing that I tell everybody and that I practice myself is gratitude. It's the quickest, shortcut to a high vibration. And gratitude, I tend to just like to imagine if I catch myself that I'm in that crazy place, I think about something that I love deeply. I usually think about my children because immediately I feel happy. And then I imagine that and I hold that feeling in my heart. And I just am grateful for being able to have them in my life. And I just let that feeling grow and spread. And I think of it like a tiny light, like those fireflies. And every time I breathe in, the light becomes bigger. And as I exhale, the light condenses, but never back to the size that it was. And then it extends again, and then it shrinks down until it envelops me. And once it envelops me, I let it, let's say, envelop the car and then the cars around me. And then I just imagine it spreading. And sometimes I think of it like the Big Bang, as if a big bang comes out of me and just blows up and spreads that light all over to anything and everyone. And always, I think also the timelines, through my ancestors, through all timelines. And after you do that, and it's such a simple visualization, you feel different. Honestly, I find it to be one of the most powerful techniques to just get back in yourself, back into the frequency of love, which is gratitude.
Yes, and we all can find something to be grateful for, whether it's your
Absolutely.
children, whether it's your 1.5-year-old Zoomy dog, whether it's your husband, whether it's the beautiful tree that you're looking at and this wonderful earth that we have the good grace to be upon. Like you can always kind of shift into the place of whatever personally for you you are grateful for. That really is the doorway into the bigger experience of love. It's the doorway into unconditional love.
I mean, even the traffic, you can be grateful that you even have a car to be sitting in the traffic.
Right.
You could
What
be having to, having no car or having to take a bus or drive a bike, take a bike or, so many things. So
mhm.
I know it's hard because we all get stuck in the limitations, right? We focus on the limitations. So the limitations feel bigger than life. Yet when you're able to switch it around, if you can catch it fast enough, you can change that vibration so quickly.
Mm. And that is our challenge.
That is the
I
challenge.
don't like the word challenge because it sounds hard and negative, but like that is what we inspire and aspire to do is to notice
Yeah.
this about ourselves, like when this is happening, and then intentionally make that conscious choice to shift into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Don Miguel Ruiz says, "This way of life is possible, and it's in your hands." Moses called it the promised land. Buddha called it nirvana. Jesus called it heaven. And the Toltecs call it a new dream. Unfortunately, your identity is mixed with the dream of the planet. All of your beliefs and agreements are there in the fog. You feel the presence of the parasite and believe that it's you. This makes it difficult to let go, to release the parasite and create the space to experience love. You are attached to the judge, attached to the victim. Suffering makes you feel safe because you know it so well, habituated to, as we have discussed, but there really is no reason to suffer. The only reason you suffer is because you choose to suffer, and we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
The only reason you suffer is because you choose to suffer. If you look at your life, you will find many excuses to suffer, but a good reason to suffer you will not find. The same is true for happiness. The only reason you are happy is because you choose to be happy. Happiness is a choice, and so is suffering. So let's pull this sentence out. There is no reason to suffer. The only reason you suffer is because you choose to suffer. And all the people who are stuck in their agreements and who are attached and connected and tethered to their victim status, get triggered when they
Yes.
hear that they're choosing to suffer. But indeed, I believe it's true. What do you think?
I believe that there's a distinction that we fail to make a lot of the times, and that's the distinction between pain and suffering. Those are two separate things. You can have physical pain, you can have emotional pain. That is something that happens, especially emotional pain happens. Something happens, there's emotional pain in the moment as you're processing. But the pain that persists, especially emotional pain, comes from us continuing to pull out that painful stimulus and relive it and relive it and replay it and talk about it and share it with others and talk to ourselves about it. So the initial act of whatever it was that caused the pain is past. It's your decision to continue to live as if it's continuously still happening that creates suffering. So, in that way, suffering is a choice. And I'm not talking about people being tortured or anything, I understand, but that's not suffering. That's pain. That's actual pain. And even some of the mental conditions that we have from PTSD and all these things, it's the mind not letting an initial stimulus that happened go, that could have happened someplace far away years ago, and still living as if that is happening now. And once that can be allowed to be let go through different techniques, you're able to come back into the present moment. And in the present moment, there's only suffering if you choose it. If you choose to continue to revisit and retell the same story that gives then meaning to certain events, which creates a belief, which creates an emotion, which creates a behavior that reinforces the whole thing. And it's just a cycle.
What about people who are in chronic, actual, debilitating pain? Because truly they're not choosing their suffering. But so the distinction there is the actual pain and the condition of the pain that they're in. But I do believe some people with chronic pain also choose to suffer. So, what is the difference right there? Like, I'm in pain, it's happening right now, but I'm also suffering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there's the physical pain, and then there's the suffering that comes from the story you tell about the physical pain that you're having. I can tell you that because off and on for years, I've been having fibromyalgia. And it can be months that I'm fine. And I'm like, it's done. It's over. Yay. Something, it was the diet change or whatever. And now I'm okay. And then all of a sudden, I'll get a flare up and it'll be just crazy at night. You just feel these shooting pains down your legs. You can't sleep. It's like restless leg and aching. Everything aches and you feel like, no, it's happening again. And then in that fear of it happening again begins the suffering. And the suffering is the being afraid of how long is it going to last? Is it going to last forever? Am I going to have to feel this? When's it going to stop? And so now what I've been doing is just being with it without the resistance. Just like, okay, there's pain happening in my legs right now. And it is painful, but I'm just going to accept it and be with this pain, as opposed to saying, I wonder if I could get a painkiller. Like, I'll take a Tylenol, but I'm not looking for a magical fix. I'm not waiting for the moment when the pain stops. I'm looking to learn how to be with the pain without making myself crazy while I wait for it to go, which it will. My grandma used to say, it's a Spanish saying, it's something about suffering and how the body, no hay mal que dure 1000 años, ni cuerpo que lo tolere. There's no harm that can last 1,000 years, nor the body that could tolerate it. So either the body will go or the suffering will end. One of the two will happen. So become friends with whatever is happening, because the quicker you let go of the resistance, the less you suffer as you wait for it to pass, which it will, one way or the other.
Oh my gosh, what a mic drop. That's so profound, Elenique. That is so profound, to make friends with the condition as you're in the moment of it. And when it's painful, that's so difficult. This reminds me of a time when I had the most terrible ear infection, and it was misdiagnosed, and it was just a raging thing. I was on the wrong medicine. Nothing was helping. Nothing was touching the pain. And it's the kind of pain that's like right in your head. It's not like it's your elbow. Like you can kind of feel like a little bit of separation. No, it's right in my consciousness. It was so terrible. And I was in awful pain, and I was alone. And at some point, though, I reached a state of awareness where I'm just like, I'm going to sink into this pain. I'm just going to be with it because it's talking to me. This is communicating something about my condition. And as opposed to just being so frenetic about the pain itself, let me just drop into it and breathe through it. And what I ended up doing was kind of making this positive association with my pain and understanding the rhythm of it, like how it would come and go, the throbbing of it. I don't know. It was just such a weird thing. It actually got me through that 12 hours that it was going to take for me to get to a different doctor who prescribed the right medicine and got me out of the problem. But there was kind of a comfortability. Is that a word? There was just kind of a comfort in associating with it in that way and choosing not to suffer, not to be in fear, not to be so chaotic and crazy because it was just too much, but rather just to be with it.
Yeah, you were with the pain, and the pain was there, and you honored it. You watched it, but you didn't fight it. The suffering comes from the fight, And I remember a lot of people, like when I would go to when I had to have chemo, I remember I would sit in my bed, and you do this with a room full of people, So there's a lot of people having it together at the same time, which is nice, because you're not alone and you don't feel like you're alone. And I would sit, and I was always sitting like in my meditation pose, and they give you this Benadryl or something like it before, because it's in case you have an allergic response. So they give you this thing, which makes you drowsy. And the nurse was always like, don't you want to lie down? And I'm like, no, I want to sit up because I want to try to do my meditation while I receive this chemo. And she's like, okay, we've never seen that before. I was like, and then they would put the different medicines. And the most aggressive one, of course, they make it red. Right? It's like this super red. Wow. And I was like, okay, when I look at this medicine, I'm going to have to change the way I think about this, because right now it looks like flaming fire is about to go into my veins. And I don't want to have that association because it's going to create the response in my body. So I would look at it and I was like, I love this medicine. It's like Kool-Aid, the Kool-Aid grandma used to make, red Kool-Aid with lots of sugar. And I would imagine that this Kool-Aid, filled with the love of my grandmother, was going into my body, making me healthy with her love. That's my visualization that I would have. And do you know what? I always left okay. Like, I mean, of course, you have your side effects and your things, but I always, in the morning, I would get up and make breakfast and everything. And everybody's like, how are you okay? And I was like, because the Kool-Aid is helping me. The power of your belief. The power of your belief is something that we just don't grasp. We just cannot understand the power of it. When you dare to believe in it and anchor it to something actually good, is just changes everything. It changes everything.
Wow. I imagine myself, if I were in a situation like that, I would have such a difficulty finding a way to quiet down the fear and get to a sacred center where you could have the single-minded thought that this is Kool-Aid. Like I would be so afraid, just like the connotations, like the stigma, like all the things. It's now a thought form. Like
Yes, it
this
is.
idea is a thought form, and I'm now connected to it, and I'm taking it in. And I guess that's the parasite of the mind too. Like he
It
talks about
is.
these different parasites that truly impose their beliefs and their will and their energy upon us. And how do you find your way out of the fear?
I
I don't.
think it's ultimately, it's not finding the way out of fear, it's finding the way back to you, right? So, like when you find yourself, the light that is dispels the darkness, which is fear. Darkness is fear. It's just different presentations of the same thing. Afraid of getting left, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of not being enough, afraid of being unworthy, of being invisible, whatever the fear is, that's the darkness that makes us do all kinds of crazy things just to be seen or just to feel safe. But if you find the way back to you, to the truth of who you are as an infinite being, as an extension of that holiness, that oneness, there is a resource that awakens in you. You are that resource, right? The observer above the mitote, right? And from the observer position, there's choice. From there, there's a choice. And then you're empowered.
Mm.
And the fear is less because you feel powerful, even in the face of very difficult circumstances. And you may not be able to change the final outcome, but you may definitely change the way you get to the end.
Mm. Powerful. And
Yeah.
I imagine we talked about OCD that one time I just stayed in my bed all night and I wasn't going to get out and do my list. I imagine demonstrating to yourself, even just one time, that you're able to find your way to that power, that empowered position, embodied position, even in the midst of all the chaos of what you're doing. Like just doing it once shows you
That's it.
I can do it every single time and I can build upon this.
Beautiful. And that's the beautiful part, right? That's why we're trying to create these new things. And that's why we're doing that ritual tonight,
Mhm.
of the full moon, of the new full moon. We have to become, we have to become aware of what we don't want consciously. Consciously want to let it go, constantly choose to let it go, and then figure out what we do want. And then no matter what the external reality shows us, don't pay attention. It just hasn't caught up with your belief yet, but it will manifest one way or the other. And that's the beautiful thing that as we're doing this work and we're choosing different behaviors, the universe is so gracious in showing you that the positive outcome. Like I had a couple of interactions with people this week that are usually people that I have a hard time with. It's for whatever reasons they're pressing subconscious buttons in me, and I normally feel myself closing. I feel that closing, shutting down that I get. And this time I said no. Breathe into this because you're making assumptions and you're holding this person hostage with your thoughts about who they have to show up for you. And I remember consciously relaxing my heart. And I have not had such a nice time with these two people in years. But my energy changed so they didn't have to match that negative expectation energy that I was throwing at them. They could just be somebody new. They could just step into some new version of themselves. So I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do that for each other and for ourselves, because I think we forget about us and how much we hold ourselves to these horrible expectations of the past, right? And that inner critic.
Mhm.
So even choosing thoughts about ourselves that are more loving is a start.
Most assuredly, it's the first place to start, I
Yeah.
think, because how
Yes.
you treat everyone else is a reflection of how you feel about yourself every single time. And how they treat you, by the way, is also a
Yes.
reflection of how you believe and feel about yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, this was a small chapter, but like it basically
Mm-hmm.
just condensed down the things that we've talked about, really just reducing it down to it is a choice. It is a choice. Wake up from the dream or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wake up from the dream, here's how. It's through love. It's
Yes.
through choosing to see this reality for what it is and see your life for what
Yes.
it has been to this point, and then make
Mm-hmm.
some decisions around how you want to change that from this point onward. Now, this wasn't the actual final chapter. The final part, it's not necessarily a chapter, is entitled Prayers, in which Don Miguel Ruiz really does take us through
Mm.
a long, beautiful prayer, prayer for the world, a prayer for us, and helps us to
Yes.
actually connect with the envisioning part of that. Because, of course,
Mm-hmm.
before anything can come into being, anything crystallizes in the physical form, we have to first imagine it into being and feel it as possible to create as
Yes.
well. So, what are our plans for this particular final piece of this book, Elenique?
So, what I am going to do is I'm going to record this one, prayers, as a meditation with music, because I want our listeners to be able to take this prayer. And if they want to listen to it every night before they go to bed, to really set that tone for what we're trying to create together. We really need to create this together. And this moment in time is inviting us, isn't it? We're all waking up. So if we can all pray a prayer of love for each other and for the world constantly, imagine the change that we can make together. So we'll attach this one
Mm-hmm.
and in as part B, as we usually do.
Mm-hmm.
And I invite all our listeners to really do this together. I am going to be doing it. I'll be doing it,
Me
daily.
too.
And let's see what we can make happen. In fact, what would be fun, Crystal, if any of you have some intention, some need that you want us to pray for together, in honor of this chapter of prayer, please feel free to leave it in the comments or send it to our email, miraculousthinking@gmail.com. Um, and allow us to be there together with you, holding that space of faith that we can create a different dream for you, for us, and for this planet together.
Yes. Collectively creating based on intention. I love this. So yes,
Yeah.
we will attach that as a second video if you're watching on YouTube, or as a second episode for this week's podcast to be released at the same time as this podcast. And I suppose before we end, unless there's anything else you want to say, I don't want to cut you off. And if you have anything else to say.
I only wanted to say that I would like to offer my thanks to Source, our thanks to Source, to the energy, whatever you call it, Source, the universe, God. I call it God, and I call it Father. And I say thank you, Father, for allowing Crystal and I to be here together with all our listeners. And I ask for blessings for Don Miguel Ruiz for
Yes.
creating such a beautiful book to help guide us out of the darkness and out of the dark dream and into a good dream. And so I just say thank you and bless all our efforts to be able to make it so.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, and so it is. And
And
I
so
do
it
want
is.
I do want to say that Elenique mentioned that we're going to be doing a new frost moon manifestation ritual tonight. And by the time you're listening to this or watching this, we've already done it. But
Yes.
if you want to be a part of things like that we create, like live streams or other little things that we're doing, please consider joining our Facebook group, which is on Facebook, and it's called Miraculous Thinking. Just go ahead and search for us, or link is in the description. Go ahead and ask to join. Come on in. If we're ever going to be doing something like that, we're going to be broadcasting that right into the group. And as soon as we reach over 100 people on our YouTube channel, we will also be able to live stream that to our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for.
I don't know.
Come on now.
Just
Come on
subscribe.
now, subscribe
Subscribe down below.
so we can get to that 100 and we can start doing some of these things for the entire community. I'm
Yes,
excited about it.
absolutely.
Well,
And you want to tell them about what's coming up next?
yeah. What's coming up next is the Kybalion or the Kybalion. We still haven't verified how to say this accurately, and I don't know that it matters,
I
but
don't
it's the
think so.
Kybalion, the Hermetic philosophy as written or created by the three initiates. Now, at first, we thought, this looks like a little book. We'll just do it in a month. But the concepts in this book, they're big. And I think we're going to want to hash them out in a way that is reasonable so that we can touch all of the points. So what we've decided to do is, instead of a 4-week book reading and discussion, we're going to make this 6 weeks. So we're going to take this right into the middle of December. We start next week. In fact, next week, we're going to be reading the first 3 chapters, including the introduction. So introduction plus 2 chapters. And then the week after that will be the next 3 chapters. And then we'll continue to guide you week by week as to what chapters we're going to read so that you can follow along. We encourage you strongly to go ahead and get this book. Or Elenique, you said there's a low-voiced daddy on YouTube who's given this information for free.
Yes, it is. You can just listen to it. I've been listening to it at night when I go to bed, for half an hour, just listening to the man, with the voice.
I don't know if it's like available via PDF online. I'm really not sure, but I like to have the physical book. I like to mark the book. So make sure that you get it, because we start next week and there's a lot of really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things to get into and workshop in the Kybalion. And we should also tell them that we are rearranging the 2 following books after that, because after the Kybalion, we were going to do Parallel Universes of Self.
Yes.
And then Path of Light. But we've decided we're going to switch those 2 up. So after Kybalion, we're going to do Path of Light.
Yes,
which
by
has
Robert Perry.
Which has to do with the Course in Miracles, right?
He's just an incredible writer, an incredible person, an amazing teacher. And I'm just excited to read this book with all of you, especially because we are going to start with our Course in Miracles weekly workbook study group in January. So I just can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
I'm excited. So we are going to make some announcements around that coming up, but Path of Light, we will start in January of 2023, and then we'll get into Parallel Universes of Self. And then we're going to have to figure out what other books we're going to be doing.
Yes.
There's so many different books we could be actually getting into. So if y'all have some ideas or some favorite spiritual books that you think would be a good fit for this podcast or this channel, please share those via comment or writing us, because we're interested. We always want to learn. We are eternal students.
Yes.
Elenique.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been so much fun. This book was just a game changer, absolutely fabulous. And I guess having said all of that, we will see you guys next week as we dive into the Kybalion.
Yes.
Love you guys. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye.